Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about the database market and cloud computing. There's a lot going on in those two sectors, including how they work together. To discuss that, I'm joined by Nipun Agarwal, Senior Vice President of Research and Advanced Development at Oracle. Nipun, very good to have you with us today.
Thank you, James. Very happy to be here.
So I know that Oracle is working to make it easier and cheaper to use multiple cloud providers, and obviously multi-cloud is very big these days. In a larger sense, what trends do you see driving the relationship between the database and cloud computing or multi-cloud computing this year? Obviously, there's a lot going on.
Right. So, James, if you look at the total revenue from the cloud computing, a big percentage of that revenue is being driven by databases. Right? Mm-hmm. So databases contribute to a good, healthy portion of the total cloud revenue. And on the other side, if you look at the growth in the cloud databases or where the revenue is coming from, a big percentage of the revenue in the cloud, in databases is coming from the cloud. So to give an example, back in 2016, about 7% of the total database revenue was from the cloud. 3 years later, in 2019, 33% of the database revenue was coming from the cloud, and that number has only gotten much larger, right? Yeah. So there's a growth of cloud databases, and that's a very good thing, both for databases as well for cloud, and that's why it's something of a lot of interest to Oracle.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, and I know there's been quite a bit of news recently. Let's talk about the Oracle news. What are the key points there?
Right. So what Oracle announced is support for MySQL HeatWave in AWS. But I guess before I get into the details, let me describe a little bit about what's MySQL HeatWave.
Sure. What is it?
So MySQL is the most popular open source database in the world, and a lot of people across various kinds of use cases, applications use MySQL. Mm-hmm. But MySQL has traditionally been designed and optimized for OLTP or transaction processing. So in the past, when customers using MySQL had to run complex queries, had to run analytics, or had to run machine learning, they would take the data out of MySQL into some other database for doing those specialized functions, whether it's complex queries or machine learning. MySQL HeatWave consolidates all this processing into the single MySQL database. Right? Uh-huh. So MySQL HeatWave is a managed service offered by Oracle for MySQL, which provides support for transaction processing, analytics, and machine learning, all inside the same database. Right? So that's basically what HeatWave is. Right? And not only is a single database, it is very, very efficient in terms of performance as well. So all this processing can be done inside MySQL database in a very performant manner.
Interesting. So is it accurate to say that HeatWave actually takes MySQL to another level?
Absolutely. And that's what we find, that more and more different kinds of workloads, which traditionally people would not run with MySQL, are now being run with MySQL HeatWave for exactly that reason, that MySQL HeatWave can more efficiently process broader workloads, which MySQL could not in the past. So that's MySQL HeatWave.
Interesting. What about the benchmarks? I know that Oracle has been issuing some benchmarks. How does Oracle compare with the other cloud database vendors?
Right. So, okay, so two parts to that. So one thing is, in terms of the big news, right, we were talking about was, MySQL HeatWave, when we offered it about 2 years back, was offered on OCI, the Oracle Cloud.
Right.
And we saw a big percentage of the customers who were using MySQL HeatWave were migrating from other clouds, including AWS. But not all customers could migrate away from AWS because of the egress cost in AWS or because of the high latency. So therefore, what we are doing is now we are offering MySQL HeatWave in AWS. So customers of AWS who want to benefit from MySQL HeatWave can do so without having to worry in terms of the egress cost or the high latency. Mm-hmm. Now coming to the benchmarks. So one of the things, or the approaches we have taken with the benchmarks, is that we want them to be fully transparent. So whenever we share any benchmark results, those scripts are available on GitHub for customers to try it. They can download the scripts, they can modify it in any ways they may like to see how the performance is on their specific workload. Mm-hmm. So there are three sets of benchmarks which we have published. One is on analytics, because HeatWave is really good for complex queries for analytic processing. So we have benchmarks on TPCH, TPCDS, on varying workloads. And what we showed is that MySQL HeatWave running in AWS is significantly faster than other analytic services running in AWS. For instance, HeatWave is faster than Redshift. It's faster than Snowflake. It's faster than Google BigQuery. Right? And it is much less expensive. So that's for analytics. Then for machine learning.
Can I ask you one question about that? Do you consider HeatWave to be a direct competitor with Snowflake?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the customers of MySQL would take the data out of MySQL and use HeatWave, would use Snowflake for analytic processing. Now they don't have to. So what our benchmarks show is that HeatWave running in AWS is 16 times faster than Snowflake. And from a price performance standpoint, it is 10x lower. So what that means is that customers running with MySQL HeatWave will find the price performance to be 10 times better than Snowflake.
Is there a customer out there who's wondering this question? I'm not sure if my question is even accurate, but they might be wondering, hey, but I want to keep everything in the Snowflake world and not have to move out to this one thing for this one move, even if it is 16% cheaper. Do people think that, or not necessarily?
People absolutely do think about it, because there is a cost for any application to change their database, right? So there is a cost. But it comes down to the cost, and it's a trade-off between what are the benefits they're getting and what is it that they need to do. Right? So if the benefit is compelling enough, right? If we are faster and we are going to be less expensive, that's a big motivation. The second thing to keep in mind, and that's an important one, is that we have not introduced any proprietary syntax in HeatWave. Whatever we're running in HeatWave is accelerating existing MySQL or SQL standard constructs, right? So if people have written applications in a SQL standard compliant manner, there is no change to the application, right? So it becomes much easier for them to move.
Interesting. I want to ask you about the future of the database. Before we go there, is there anything else that we should know about HeatWave? It seems like a really interesting product.
Yes, I guess it is definitely a very interesting product, and we are piggybacking on the success and popularity of MySQL, and we feel that there's an opportunity which we can offer to customers, that instead of having a number of different databases, each one of them specialized for a specific need, we can offer all the computation inside MySQL. So one other thing which I guess we didn't touch upon much is about support for machine learning. So MySQL HeatWave also has support for machine learning inside the database. And there's a security angle to it. So what this means is customers don't need to move the data out of MySQL for training the models or for running explanations. And even for this, for machine learning, all this processing is done inside MySQL HeatWave, and is significantly faster, like 25 times faster than Redshift ML. And these scripts also are available on GitHub for customers to try for themselves.
Interesting. All right. So some futuristic stuff. It makes me think, what is the future of the database? Obviously, there's a lot going on. What do you see, Nipun, in terms of 5-7 years out for the database, and the role that open source plays in that?
So one of the trends we've been seeing for the last many years, and it's only accelerating, is that more and more of the new applications, database applications, are going to be built in the cloud. So the adoption or the growth of databases in the cloud is only going to accelerate, right? So that's definitely a very important platform for everyone. So there's a couple of things which I think are going to be very important. One is the scalability, right? That a customer's workload changes over the course of the year, and customers only want to pay for what they're actually using. So designing databases, or those databases which have been designed or optimized for the cloud, are going to do well, and that's going to be an important paradigm. The second aspect is smart automation, right? But that, what I mean is people need to have capabilities which are data driven, or they have intelligence based on machine learning, which can do that automation, because gone are the days when you will have a DBA per a department, right? And with so many deployments, hundreds of thousands of deployments of MySQL or a database in the cloud, there has to be enough automation, which is not static, which is workload aware, and it has the intelligence. So that's another area where I feel machine learning based automation is going to be very important. Then I guess the final thing is that there are so many vendors who are now offering some very neat capabilities in database processing, that I think the whole area is really set up for a lot of innovation And this is going to be really good, beneficial for the customers, because when you have more choices, everyone tries to like innovate better and faster. And I think we have done a terrific job with MySQL HeatWave. And given that MySQL is such a popular database, and like, it's MySQL HeatWave has been optimized for the cloud, I think there's a very good opportunity for us in the next several years.
You know what? I think the piece about the smart automation is really interesting. It's probably self-explanatory, but what are some of the things it's going to be automating?
Right. Okay, so I'll give you a simple example. Take the case of partitioning, right? So if you have some amount of data and you want to partition it based on some characteristics, in the past, like, most databases offer some mechanism by which you can partition, and this partitioning scheme may be static, it's based on some value. But the question is, how do you determine at any given point in time that which is the right way to partition the data? So instead of a DBA or some user doing it manually, what we want the system to do is, based on the queries which are being run, based on the workload, the system determines what is the most ideal candidate for the partitioning key, and we partition the data so that it provides the best performance. And then over time, if the workload changes, the system repartitions, right? So that's an example of workload-aware smart automation, which I think will become more and more mainstream.
Right, interesting. Nipun, I think you said it. It's fascinating. It's going to be a cool sector to watch in the years ahead. I totally appreciate you sharing your insight today. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, James.